The Newshour Special Edition.
Hello and welcome. Thank you very much for joining us here on Times Now. This is the Newshour Special Edition this Saturday evening, and I'm Heena Gambhir. Viewers, tonight we begin with two quotes from the Art of War, the ancient Chinese military treatise attributed to Sun Tzu, the 5th century BC military strategist. 1. If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy or yourself, you will succumb in every battle. 2. Victorious warriors win first and then go to war, while defeated warriors go to war first and then seek to win. Viewers, the destruction and agony of the Middle East war has entered its 4th week. It's a war in which each passing day the purpose of war has shifted like sand dunes in a blizzard. From Iran's nuclear bomb architecture, regime change in Iran, dismantle Iran's military strength, hurt Iran's economy, to dismantle its military. There is uncertainty even over what's the battlefield. It started with the US and Israel striking Iran. Iran took the war to the entire Middle East. It closed the Strait of Hormuz and involved the world's energy economy. The war's allies, enemies and targets aren't clear. America's allies in NATO aren't ready to plunge into the war. Countries like UAE, Saudi Arabia, Oman and Qatar are targets for Iran as they help America's war machine. US wants to hit Iran's military capability and Israel hits Iranian oil facilities, which US wants to be left alone. Then there is no ground for a ceasefire, no one to broker it. The war, it seems, was started without a strategy. And now those who started it have no face saver or strategy to end their military excursion. The narrative is confusing. Will Donald Trump push for ceasefire or deploy Marines in the region? At one point, he appears to downplay the conflict, hints at de-escalation, but then the rhetoric shifts as he hints at a potent offensive is coming against Iran. Take a look at his many flip-flops.
This was just an excursion into something that had to be done. We're getting very close to finishing that. We did a little excursion. We had to take this little couple of weeks, few weeks. You know, you never like to say too early you won. We won. We won the bet. In the first hour, it was over. We've already won in many ways, but we haven't won enough. It's an excursion that will keep us out of a war.
Maybe we shouldn't even be there at all.
Look, we can have dialogue, but I don't want to do a ceasefire. You know, you don't do a ceasefire when you're literally obliterating the other side. We're not looking to do that.
While the US president seems a bit confused, there's a lot that has happened over the last few hours. Let's now quickly run you through the developments of the day. Donald Trump has lashed out at the US allies for refusing to support military action against Iran in Strait of Hormuz. In a sharp remark, he called them cowards and warned, "We will remember." Iran has reportedly fired 2 ballistic missiles targeting the US-UK military base at Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean, marking a sharp escalation in the conflict. Iran's Natanz nuclear site was targeted earlier. The International Atomic Energy Agency has said there has been no rise in off-site radiation that was detected. The chief also, in fact, urged restraint to avoid any risk of a nuclear accident. Then, a kindergarten in Israel's Rishon LeZion was hit by fragments of a missile. It led to major damage, but luckily, The school was closed and no loss of life was reported. Take a look at this report.
You will now see the destruction which has taken place in this kindergarten school. And here you see the drum and the books and all. It's all spread around. It is spread out into the whole complete hall. And the ceilings, if you see, it has peeled out. The tremors of the wave of the blast has created this. Missiles don't discriminate between children or people, and wherever they fall, they'll be creating destruction. It's a major, it's almost 1 feet wide ceiling, but then the explosive has been able to penetrate inside this ceiling also.
Viewers, are now coming to the big twist. Trump has temporarily eased sanctions on Iranian oil. He wants to stabilize global oil prices. His oil-producing allies like Oman, Qatar and UAE have been forced to shut down their facilities. The situation gets even more complicated as Iran has now pushed back, denying availability of floating crude for global markets. So on one hand, US wants to hurt Iran. On the other, it wants Iranian oil to cool the global prices and thus dismissing the very premise of sanctions against Iran. Now connect this to what I just now told you. The same leadership that is sending mixed signals on war and ceasefire is also sending mixed signals on economic pressure. So we ask tonight, if Iran is free to sell oil, is the maximum pressure strategy against Iran jettisoned? Has Iran managed to force a rethink in Washington's strategy? And lastly, the bigger question tonight, who is really dictating the terms of this conflict? That's going to be our big debate this evening on the Newshour Special Edition this Saturday evening. And to discuss it, I'm joined on the broadcast by D.P. Srivastava, former Indian ambassador to Iran, Brahma Chelani, who is a strategic affairs expert, Dr. Jeffrey Gunter, former U.S. ambassador. We also have with us Peter Kuznick, author and professor of history and director of the Nuclear Studies Institute at American University. Good evening to all of you, gentlemen. Thank you very much for speaking with us here on this broadcast tonight. D.P. Srivastava, to you first. I mean, in your opinion, Trump is confused. Do you think he's looking for some kind of an exit strategy?
Well, he has dropped regime change, which was the original justification for the coordinated strike by Israel and US on 28th February, in which Israel assassinated the Supreme Leader Khamenei. Now, regime change does not figure in President Trump's speech. He has confined himself to military targets. So it's not the winding down of the operations, but at least the goals have been revised downwards. The second part, and this is he has to face the reality that the Persian Gulf, through which 20% of the world's oil supply and 20% of the LNG passes through Hormuz Strait, is controlled by Iran. Now, if US leaves at this stage or accepts a ceasefire, with the Persian Gulf remaining in Iranian hands, this will be a major long-term diplomatic setback to US. So he cannot leave. And at the same time, the world's most powerful navy cannot or does not want to go inside Persian Gulf. It's a narrow confine. The request to other allies has not really brought any substantive help. So you have a paradoxical situation that the Iranian oil is flowing, but the oil from the Gulf countries, which are American allies, cannot get out, and America is forced to lift sanctions on Iranian oil. And in fact, the most sweeping part, I was an Indian ambassador to Iran during the first round of sanctions, and we did buy oil. But, there were secondary sanctions. First, there was an interim deal which allowed us to buy, and then the secondary sanctions were lifted, which allowed third countries to buy oil. But the primary sanctions remained on American companies buying. Now, under the present Treasury order, US Treasury order, even the primary sanctions have been lifted, which shows the American desperation because the oil prices have shot up to $110, $112 Brent. OPEC basket has gone up to 132.
Right.
The Indian crude oil basket has gone to $156 per barrel.
Right.
Now, if the situation continues, the world economy is going to tip into recession. And that is the reason for this quick change in the, in the decision to lift sanctions. But unless the war is brought to an end, this is only a temporary reprieve.
Okay.
And release of 400 million barrels of oil from IEA does not really help because this is spread over a long period. So the daily release does not go beyond 2 to 3 million barrels,
right,
which cannot compensate for 20 million barrel supplies lost immediately. And LNG
right,
supply, of course, is more desperate because most countries, there's no LNG storage. There are
right,
strategic reserves for oil. There's strategic reserve of gas in developed rich countries like America and Europe.
Okay.
But most other countries don't have. India does not have gas reserves. So that's a much more concerning situation.
Okay. Ambassador Srivastava, some interesting points you've made, and I would like to take those across to Dr. Jeffrey Gunter now. What Ambassador Srivastava is saying means Iran, though weaker, has managed to score a win over US and Israel, isn't it?
Let's get real here. Let's have a dose of reality. The United States and Israel have absolutely decimated the terrorist Iranian regime. If you don't believe me, go ask their supreme leader. If you don't believe me, go tell me where their Navy is. Their Navy is not floating, is not sailing. Their Air Force is not flying. Their drones are not launching. Let's be incredibly clear. The United States of America and Israel have executed almost a flawless military operation against a terrorist government and terrorist regime. Let there be no misunderstanding about that. As far as war, and quoting The Art of War, as we've talked about many times on your show, victorious warriors win, then they go to war. But also remember, warfare is deception. And the United States is executing this war flawlessly. And the fact that we're on your wonderful and esteemed show with your great panelists and you can't figure out what direction President Trump is going, that is absolute brilliance. And that shows the greatness of really one of the greatest presidents the United States has ever had, my former boss and friend, Donald J. Trump.
Brahmachalani, I mean, I really don't know what to say here because, to explain to our viewers the flip-flop and the confusion, I played, a package for our viewers in the beginning itself because some days Trump has called it an excursion, some days a war, some days he says we won the war, and some days he says dialogue, ceasefire. I mean, there is so much of confusion there. And then he once accused people of fueling Russian war, with Ukraine for those countries which were buying Russian oil. He gave a waiver to those countries. Then he also went ahead, eased sanctions against Iran. I mean, if indeed Trump was winning, as is being claimed by Dr. Jeffrey Gunter, then why would he need to do things like this? Why would he need to reach out to NATO allies and his allies to help him somehow open the Strait of Hormuz? Why would he need to do all these things?
The very questions that you ask, Heena, provide the answer. The very fact that he undertook this mission, hoping for a quick victory, the way he managed to kidnap President Maduro from Caracas and install a pliable regime in Venezuela, he thought that decapitation would result in the collapse of the regime in Tehran. But what we are seeing are lessons that could have could have been learned before starting this war. Because we know from past history that regime change wars rarely unfold as planned. In Iran, instead of regime change, Trump's war is only producing regime hardening. And we also know from past history that decapitation strategies often underestimate the resilience of political systems. External attacks frequently strengthen the legitimacy of embattled regimes. In the case of Iran, when you kill the supreme leader, who was not only the religious leader of the Shias of the world, but also Iran's head of state, you create the halo of martyrdom. In Shia culture, martyrdom is deeply embedded. This has helped the regime to mobilize the people in support. If your strategy was to incite popular rebellion against the regime, the last thing you should have done is to carry out decapitation. And I think the third lesson from this war is that air power, however overwhelming, cannot by itself produce reliable political outcomes. This war has again underscored the limits of air power, despite the target country being much weaker. But I think to go back to the basic question that you asked, that Trump has had to revise his objectives because of the obstacles that have come his way. And I think it's clear now, and it's obvious. It is obvious to everybody that that it's easier to enter into a war than to exit that war. And today, if this war ends with the Iranian regime intact, without any regime change, Trump's Operation Epic Fury will go down in history as Operation Epic Failure.
You're calling it Operation Epic Failure. I think I like to call it Operation Epic Paradox. Professor Khuznik, now going by what Dr. Jeffrey Gunter mentioned earlier, I want to ask you, so is Trump then asking a decimated country to help him ease the world oil situation? I mean, is this for real?
Is any of this for real? Is Dr. Gunter's comments for real? They're comical. He's trying to put lipstick on a pig, and he knows it as well as everybody else. This war is an unmitigated disaster from the very beginning. Trump lied us into a war. I'm old enough to have seen my country lied into war after war after war, and so is Dr. Gunter. And, from the beginning, Iran's going to have missiles within weeks that can hit the United States. The Defense Intelligence Agency said it's going to take 10 years at least before they have missiles that can hit the United States. Iran is enriching uranium. The International Atomic Energy Agency says Iran is not enriching uranium. Iran's reconstituted its nuclear program. There's no evidence at all to support that. So we're lied into another war. The American people don't want this. The American people are strongly opposed to this, overwhelmingly opposed to this. Trump is running scared because he's going to get his butt handed to him, as his party is in the midterm elections. He knows that. Gas prices have gone up $1. Trump ran on the Epstein files, and then he tries to cover them up. He ran on affordability, that the prices were too high. Now he's raising the prices. And he ran on no war in the Middle East and no more stupid long wars. And now he's lied about that also. So this is overall, strategically and tactically, is a disaster. Can they blow things up? Yes, Dr. Gunter is right. The United States can blow things up. Can we kill people? Yes, we can. Can we support Bibi the Butcher in Gaza and here again? Yes, we can. But when Joe Kent resigned in protest, and this is a Trump backer, even an election denier, he says that this was Israel's war, and they pulled the United States into it. But what worries me, and let me make my last point on this, what worries me is that on December 30th, at the meeting at Mar-a-Lago, Bibi told Trump, if you do this is something that none of your predecessors had the guts to do, and it's going to make you a great president. Well, there's one other thing that none of his predecessors had the guts to do, and that was use nuclear weapons. And that's why we're getting out the warning that Trump can break the nuclear taboo, because he's broken every other norm, every tradition, every law. And the only taboo that's left is the nuclear taboo, and that we don't want to see him break.
Okay. Dr. Jeffrey Gunter.
Yeah, let's get real. I don't know whether it's epic delusion or epic buffoonery that we're watching. The first comment is epic delusionary. I mean, the reality is that we are devastating the Iranian military. And remember, it's epic lack of memory, too. The objective here was to eliminate the capability of Iran. Marco Rubio, Jared Kushner, and the rest of our negotiators sat for months.
Dr. Jeffrey Gunter, sorry to interrupt, because I don't really have a lot of time on this debate, but you still firmly believe that it's a flawless military operation. You still firmly believe that US has decimated Iran, and you're still defending your statements. But I want to ask you, a winner doesn't call its old allies coward. A winner doesn't call up global rivals for help. A winner does not hurt the world's energy balance, doesn't bomb a country and say, please help us stabilize the oil prices. Unfortunately, this is what we are seeing that's happening in front of our eyes. And you are still saying that America is winning the war. I mean, if that was the case, why would Trump ease sanctions on Iranian oil?
Facts are facts. The reality is President Trump, prior to this comment, has said, we really don't need their help. And remember, I was on your shows for the last 6 months saying, the relationship between India and America is just damaged forever. And in fact, President Trump and Modi have a great relationship, and they're going to be getting together. So remember, this is political rhetoric. This is leadership. Let's imagine World War II. If we had decapitated Adolf Hitler early in the war, it would have saved tens of millions of lives. And let there be no misunderstanding. The fact that President Trump has eliminated the Iranian nuclear threat will save tens of millions of lives from this terrorist, maniacal, theocratic, Islamic terrorists.
Okay.
And the same fear that India has with its Pakistani neighbors having nuclear arms, we cannot afford to have another maniacal country like Iran have a nuclear arm. It's brilliant. It saves lives.
Okay, Ambassador Srivastava, how will you like to respond? Because, in the beginning, when the war started, there was also this narrative that Russia and China were the indirect targets. But do you think eventually the war has partially helped both?
It has not partially, it has greatly helped both. And especially it has helped China. Because China would be delighted to see America lost in forever wars, which President Trump had promised to avoid. And Russia has got a temporary reprieve from American pressure because the sanctions on purchase of Russian oil have been lifted. So, it's the repercussions of the war have gone beyond the region and affected the global equations. I may also add here that in case America was, there's no doubt that militarily, Iran is no match for America. And the weaker party, militarily weaker party, has to take more punishment, which Iran has done. But that does not mean that America has succeeded in securing its political aims. Iran has shown its ability to prosecute the war despite the transition in leadership at different levels. And it has shown that it can control the Persian Gulf. Of course, there's no justification for attack on the Gulf countries. They are not belligerent. So to attack them on the premises that they will put pressure on America to put pressure on Israel to end the war, that could be the logic, but it's a short-term logic. It will go against Iran in the long term.
Okay.
But America certainly has, I think they have lost the political game.
Okay. Last word to you, Mr. Brahmachalani. Do you think even though Iran is weak as compared to US and Israel put together, but despite that, despite the weakness, Iran has managed to force a rethink in Washington's strategy? Otherwise, why would Trump actually, seek help when he doesn't get that help? He goes out and says, I never needed it.
Well, the answer is obvious. See, at home, Trump's attempt to exercise untrammeled presidential power has been constrained by US courts. They have nullified several of his actions. But Trump's exercise of American power overseas has no check. The UN has been marginalized, the Security Council is gridlocked. Other Western leaders like Starmer, Merz, and Macron have proved too politically weak. The only one who has spoken out against the war is the Spanish Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez. And even in the global south, there's not a single voice of courage that has emerged thus far.
Right.
And the global silence on Trump's wars, and this is only the seventh military action that he has undertaken since returning to office. He has ordered military strikes in 7 different countries in 12 months. And I think the global silence on Trump's wars highlights a vacuum of moral leadership across both the West and the global South. And if he were to succeed, just imagine, if he were to succeed in the Iran war mission, imagine what this will mean for international peace and security. Trump suddenly would become the biggest threat to international peace and security.
Right. We'll leave it there. Some very interesting points have been made. Thank you very much, all of you gentlemen. I'm completely out of time. Appreciate all of you for joining us here on this debate. We'll, of course, be tracking what happens in West Asia very closely here on Times. Now, for now, a short break.